So yeah, welcome to Lunch Without Doc. This is a first. But if you all received the information today, we're going to be talking about challenges that are facing college basketball this season. And obviously, Mark and I were on a webinar yesterday that was directed by Lead One. The title was "What Athletic Departments Should Know About College Basketball Bubble Scenarios." And Dan Gavitt, the VP for NCAA basketball, was on the call, as well as University of Maryland head coach Mark Turgeon. Tom McMillan facilitated the call, and there were some other individuals as well who participated. So I think we're going to use what we heard yesterday from that call as the gist of our information, and then certainly we can open it up for thoughts and questions. But you know, obviously, I think as athletic coaches, administrators, we've seen the spring season cancel. We've seen the fall season for most of us get canceled. We're obviously very concerned that we don't repeat some of the same mistakes in the winter that we may have done in the spring and in the fall. So we have to figure out, what have we learned from the spring and the fall, and how can we implement that so that we can pull off our winter sports season, primarily basketball. So a lot of what was discussed yesterday was playing in a bubble, you know, and the benefits of playing in a bubble. It's safe, it's secluded, it's sanitized. So, you know, those are some of the benefits. It's consistent. It's congruent with COVID code of conduct. It has after action athlete accountability if you're in a bubble. You limit the variables, limit the exposure, limit the risks, and you protect the teams and you protect the season. So there is a lot of emphasis right now, taking what the NBA has learned out of Orlando primarily, and seeing if we can't, in fact, mimic that with either non-conference, conference schedule, or both. Dan Gavitt was able to give us a pretty unique perspective. They have researched, the NCAA has researched all 352 Division I institutions who play basketball. There's 76% of all D1 institutions on November 25 will have either finished their semester on campus, or they will release their campus at Thanksgiving and finish the rest of the semester online. So around Thanksgiving, you're going to see 76% of all Division I institutions create by default a potential bubble on each of their respective campuses. And many of us are not coming back until sometime in mid to late January, potentially. So you could have conceivably the months of December and January where college campuses may very well mimic what you saw down in Orlando. So Dan Gavitt used the term controlled environment, not bubble, but controlled environment. So that might be taking place around the country on at least 76% of the college campuses. Coach Turgeon from Maryland, he was emphatic, and I'm sure he echoes the sentiments of all of you. He just said, you know, hey, we just want to play. You know, just tell us how. Tell us where to show up, when to show up. We just want to play. The kids want to play. We want to have a season. You know, it was so frustrating in mid-March last year to have the season abruptly called on everyone, either during your tournament or in advance of the NCAA tournament. So his point was, let's just find a way to play. What's going to be crucial for helping us accomplish competition this year is going to be the continued evolution of testing. You know, saliva testing, the availability of tests, the decreased cost in testing, the quick, reliable results of tests. As technology advances, that is going to aid considerably in those efforts. I would expect that next week the NCAA is going to start announcing what the basketball season may look like. And as Dan Gavitt said, with so many schools, 76% around Thanksgiving, not having any individuals on campus, the expectation is that the basketball season will be back from November 10 to November 25th. So we'll lose 2 weeks of competition. There'll be no scrimmage opportunities. So we will start the season around Thanksgiving. And we could see a reduction from 31 games. That could be reduced by 3 to 5 games to take into account the 2 weeks that would be lost for the season. The other possibility, though, is the NCAA could say, we're going to still allow you to play 31 if you can get 31 games in. So there also could be, right now the minimum number of contests to count as a season is 25. You could see the minimum reduced quite a bit to take into account any potential situations that may occur on specific college campuses. They were talking that it could be reduced up to 50% to 12 or 13. I was on a call this morning and an individual said that they expected that the minimum would be more imposed on conference games, that you could see a minimum of 14 games for a conference season that would count for the minimum that would then be evaluated for potential NCAA tournament opportunity. The Pac-12 and the Ivy have announced many weeks ago that they were not going to start playing basketball until after January 1. So you've got 2 conferences out of 32 who are out there saying no matter what, they're not going to start until January 1st. So what we're seeing, and I'll turn it over to Mark at this point, what we're seeing now is there's a lot of conversation among promoters about playing pod tournament type events for non-conference. And then there's also been a lot of conference conversation on how do you pull a conference season together successfully. I'll let Mark kind of talk about those items. And then certainly anyone who has any questions or thoughts or anything that you may have heard, by all means, jump in. And I know we have a number of other athletic directors and administrators who are part of conversations, with their respective leagues as well, who can shed some light on where we are right now. Mark?
Thanks, Wood. I mean, you pretty much covered what I had planned on talking about. So I'll ask you some questions. Now, so I think maybe then just to pause from what we learned yesterday, I'll give you sort of a real-time, real-life example of the challenges in front of us and how I think the advancement in technology and testing is so critical. So last night around 5:30, I learned here at the University of Albany that we had some off-campus, we're having a spike in Albany County of COVID positives in our community. We identified a couple groups off campus, one of which was a cluster of student athletes. And based on that information, we're in a indefinite pause right now for all athletic related activities, so we can get this under control, isolate, quarantine those students. If this would have happened in the spring, or without this testing, it would be hard. We would literally have to lock down. Testing was not available. The PCR testing that is available is expensive. So on our campus, and like many of your campuses are starting to do across the country, is through our research program, we've developed a saliva test, and we're doing pool tests. They're pools of 4, and so the cost for these tests is literally $4 because we're doing everything internally. We're putting the kits together. Our researchers are doing the actual testing on campus. Within 24 hours, we can get results back. Should any pool be positive, so the way this works, I'm sure you probably are familiar, but so 4 individuals spit into a tube. then they're randomized 4 tubes together, combine the saliva, test that pool. So that allows us to get a good sense on what the infection rate may be within any population. You can do it by team. We're doing all our student athletes. You can do it by dormitory. You can do some other things. So if anyone in this pool comes back positive, then those 4 individuals then go take a PCR test, and we have a company that's set up on campus that can do the PCR test. Again, we'll have we can zero in on who actually is positive in that pool, and then go through the policies and procedures on that. So as this testing becomes more available, we're hoping that that'll satisfy whatever the eventual NCAA criteria is around testing, that this combination of pool, saliva, and potential PCR on as necessary may allow us financially to do it. I think Wood mentioning, Dan Gavitt's comments on when the D1 Council votes on the start of basketball, it won't just be the start date, as Wood say, it'll be the maximum and minimum number of games. I think that minimum number is really important, given the fact that you could easily be in the same situation that we're in right now. And ours is just happening at the beginning of the semester. Hopefully we can get under control. So I think that's really important to note going forward. And then, in terms of doing this bubble concept, not everyone on this call, not every school can afford, I think the price tag on some of these are ranging anywhere from $50,000 to $75,000 with the chance to get, 6 to 8 non-conference games together, which is great. But many of us are sitting around the country with devastated budgets. And while the cost I think it's important to know your cost per home game and your cost per road game, so you can sort of decide financially how do you want to, if you can invest and take an opportunity. But I think the statistic that Dan shared, that Wood alluded to, that 76% of our schools starting November 25th or effectively will be a bubble. And in our case, we may not start the spring semester until February 1, which would give our league a chance to certainly get in as many conference games as we want, and gives us the chance early on to play non-conference. And then the other thing I think that are complicating this is like state of New York. I bet everybody on this call might be residing and working in the state that is on our restricted travel list. So we can't go or have teams come from 33 to 35 states right now without a 14-day mandatory quarantine, and that's regardless of providing negative COVID tests or not. So there's a lot of moving parts of this that continue to develop. But I think, for me, that testing piece is going to be, I think, the key to all our success in being able to do this.
Yeah, I would add that Dan Gavitt mentioned that if any of us have contracts to play teams from November 10 to November 25, whether they're guarantee games, home and home, he said that the NCAA legal team has advised him and others that those contracts would technically be null and void because they fall outside of the permissible playing dates of the new NCAA season. So we should not have any difficulties with any games that might be scheduled during a time frame that has been changed for a new season that may tip as late as November 25th. But then he went further to say that he would hope that every school and every coach and administrator would be doing the right thing relative to contracts and not trying to enforce or bend anyone over on a bad situation contractually, so that would be the outcome of those games that might be scheduled in the first 2 weeks. So what we find ourselves looking at is we've really got 2 buckets of games. We have the first bucket is our non-conference season. The second bucket is our conference season. So how do we protect both of those? And I think what we're seeing in various conferences is there are committees that are starting to form within each of our leagues, and they're taking a look at how do you play the 16, 18, 20 games that we might have in our respective conferences. I talked to a member of the A10 They have a committee. What they're looking at potentially is, okay, many of our schools in the A10 can drive. So let's make sure that we keep those drivable games where we can fairly well coordinate and protect. Let's keep the drivable games as they are. But for all those who are flying to games, then you might implement a pod system for conference games where you bring a group of schools who are going to be flying anyway to a agreed upon location where it might be an AAU type situation where you have 6, 8 teams. They're there for anywhere from 7 to 8 days, and maybe you play 4 or 5 games in that time period. One of the benefits of many of our academic calendars is so many classes are online, or we're going to be out of school for some of this time period. So we're not talking about a lot of missed class time. So you could see a hybrid pod system in some conferences, yet also have some drivable, just single game type scenarios within a league. Then from a non-conference standpoint, I think something that's gaining a lot of momentum is what Mark talked about, is just you get 6, 8 schools who agree to go to a particular location, and it may not have to do anything with a promoter. It's just a willingness by a number of schools to get together and play a mass of non-conference games. And our coach, Jeff Jones, has even talked about the possibility, could we perhaps take the non-conference schedule for this year and just ask all of our opponents, would they consider just moving it back a year? And then that frees up our entire non-conference schedule to just go create pod opportunities, whether they be in Richmond, Virginia, whether they be in DC, whether it be somewhere in North Carolina, where again, you create that AAU type system and play a handful of games. So you might do 2 or 3 pods for the non-conference and get all of your 11 or so non-conference games in 2 or 3 different isolated opportunities. So I think that's gaining some momentum. And then obviously the NCAA is extremely motivated to have the tournament. Dan Gavitt gave no hope that we would have everyone make the NCAA tournament this year. I think it'd be phenomenal. I think that would, you talk about giving college basketball a shot in the arm. If everybody had a shot at starting in the NCAA tournament, you talk about the eyeballs around the country, the significant interest that would be gained. Not that we lack interest, but golly, you talk about putting everybody in. It would just take a couple days to whittle it back down to the 68. But that would be really, really neat. But I got no indication that was going to happen, or even an expanded field. So the NCAA will work very, very hard to make sure that there is an NCAA tournament this year. And I have no doubt that there will be an NCAA postseason tournament this year. So that's the update, the overview. I'd love to hear. I know a number of our coaches are involved with scheduling. I know you all are talking conceptually, maybe what you're hearing. We have a number of athletic directors from various conferences who may also be having conversation within their own leagues about direction for the season. So let's open it up.
Yeah, while we're waiting for some questions, I'll just share a little bit about, in the America East, we have obviously a working group like most conferences do. And while we're not yet at the point where we have recommendations, I would say the best way to put it is everything is on the table in an effort to get in as many conference and non-conference games as possible. We're even having some discussions about what does a pod look like, or a bubble look like in conference. So I mentioned earlier some of the challenges here with travel from state to state. So we may take weekends. It could happen. We take weekends where long weekends where teams come to, say, Albany, and we have 4 to 6 teams, and we try to get in as many conference games as we can. And so it may not be the traditional, home here in Albany, home in Stony Brook. It might be 2 home games in Albany, or 2 in an effort just to kind of work our way around some of these challenges that we have here currently in the Northeast that we don't think are going to go away anytime soon. So also, what does our conference championship format look like? We may not be able to go with the traditional model where in the America East, the high seeds host on their campus, ultimately with the high seed left in hosting the championship game. That might not be a possibility. So we're looking at all kinds of different scenarios, even within our own conference schedule and how we do these. So I would say there's no such thing as a bad idea right now. And again, as Wood said, if you guys want to help populate this questions with this chat box, we've got a lot of folks on that can help. Not Doc, I know, has 2 pages of questions for us. Unfortunately, can't be here with the technology at hand, but would be curious to hear from others, coaches, ADs on this about things you're looking at. Here's a note here. Oh, Doc's location. Just as an update, where is Waldo? Where is Doc? They're having IT problems with technology for those of you joining us. So that's why we're doing lunch without Doc here.
I know I got a text from Ken Kavanagh. I think he might have an update on the Ivy League, perhaps. And then I know Kim Record is on with, maybe she can share some things about what might be going on in the Southern Conference, any conversations that they may be having. Ken?
Well, yeah, we found out surprisingly that the Ivy League actually is starting sooner than January 1st because our men are scheduled to play Dartmouth, and we had heard all the information about January 1, and we had not heard back from them, so we just assumed we were going to reschedule, and it's a home game. But then they came back and said, oh, no, we're still planning on coming, and their explanation was that the Ivy chose to discontinue all competition through the end of the fall semester, and they happen to be getting done at Thanksgiving. So Princeton's women's team's supposed to come, but we haven't heard them say they're coming down yet, but we are expecting the big green.
That's good.
Okay.
Would we get? Oh, hey, Kim.
Yeah, okay. It's so wonderful to see so many of you on the call that I know who will not play us in a home and home. So I could just say, I'm not going to tell you what we're doing because we've got it figured out. But because I love love Wood so much and Wes, there are a couple of different things that seem to be out there right now. The Southern, we're doing the same thing as everybody else, trying to not make too many plans until after the decision is made, because for schools in our league, those guarantee games are significant. And not playing FCS football, it's really been a challenging financial situation. I've talked to, you all may be aware, Winthrop, Ken Halpin, I don't know if they're on the call or not, has an interesting situation that they have a new facility with 7 or 8 courts that they're looking at having people come down for possibly, a week, 2 weeks, stay in the dorms. They're looking to see if they can get some high majors. Who knows on that? The challenge for a state school, and what we've found, and I'd say the same thing because we've got the Greensboro Coliseum, which has, if you put down portable floors 8 to 10, there's just, there's a lot of red tape and a lot of bureaucracy, which would give a reason for a third party to be able to come in and create something. At the same time, they're going to want to make money too. There are a couple of other facilities, and I don't know if Janet Cohn is on the call or not. Asheville has done quite a bit of work. And then later today, I'm hosting a call with the ADs in the state of North Carolina, state schools minus Chapel Hill and NC State, to look at what we might do playing on our own campuses and driving. So, for example, Greensboro, Elon, A&T, High Point, Charlotte, App, because that would reduce a lot of cost. Now, that may work in the state of North Carolina, given the number of schools that we have. But, and you know, it's challenging for everybody. And at the end of the day, what I would say to you as coaches on the call that I've said to my head coach, at this moment in time, the goal is to play games. All right, we're all competitive. We all want to win. But if there are 8 teams and there's going to be somebody you don't want to play, we don't have time for that. We need to play games. If you're 0-11 going into your conference play, nobody wants that. I don't want that. But we can't get into a situation where this team won't play that team because for whatever reason, we have to play whoever it is that we can play. So that is sort of my big takeaway of let's get the number of teams, let's play the games so that we can have the tournament and hopefully have some normalcy next year.
You know, Kim, following up on that, and I see Jeff Cups is on the call from VCU. We've had a number of coaches, and Robert, I'm not sure if we've got you guys linked in, but Richmond in Virginia is in the heart of the state of Virginia. There are 14 Division I institutions in the state of Virginia. We've talked about to VCU that maybe they host, and maybe 6 or 8 of us from a non-conference standpoint take our teams to Richmond. We have our own buses for each team. We keep the bus for a week. We play, let's say, 4 games or 5 games in a 7-8 day time frame. It's a controlled environment, no fans. Try and get some TV coverage from it, and you get basically it's a Commonwealth of Virginia basketball event that you can get a critical mass of non-conference games at a very economical rate. So we've actually had conversation. I'd be curious to know from our coaches who were on the call, have you all within your states where you might have a large number of Division I institutions who are in different conferences come together for non-conference opportunity in a controlled, centralized location?
The technology guy might have kind of figured out how to get me on the Zoom call with my phone. So the internet's all shut down at ETSU. I guess there's so many brilliant ideas coming out of here. It probably couldn't handle all these great ideas coming out of ETSU. But really appreciate you and Mark kind of taking this over. Great to hear from Kim and Ken. And I think, you guys, all of you have done a great job. We've been talking about, these kind of events. ETSU is really looking to do one too. Coach Shea has really kind of instigated the thing. And we have so many universities close to us in Johnson City that we think it just makes sense. And after Thanksgiving, the university is going to be pretty well shut down. So we're pretty sure we can sanitize some, dorms and, food service. And with the dome, we can probably put down 3 courts. We've got all kind of weight rooms. So I think those kind of ideas are things that are out there. And, this is one that, we feel this isn't going to be a, money grab for ETSU. This is just going to be an opportunity for teams to come and play, with the only, their only expenses are going to be the actual cost. So that's what we're trying to do. And I think it's going to be great. And hearing what you guys are doing in Virginia, and I know Mark has talked a little bit about that, and hearing what Kim and Ken said is great. But I apologize for this. This is really great. But there's a lesson to be learned when you do an important Zoom call. Have 2 locations where you co-host from, so you can always, in case the internet goes down, you got another one. So those are kind of what I've kind of picked on. But once again, thanks, Wood. Thanks, Mark, for kind of taking this thing over.
Yeah. Thanks, Doc. It's good to hear your voice without being able to see you. I mean that as a compliment, of course. Hey, we do have a number of questions that have populated the chat, so I appreciate those of you who are sending those in. So I'll just open up. So one of the questions is, what are we hearing? What are coaches, ADs hearing about MTEs? And I know we're in a situation where we're scheduled to play in Mohegan Sun, and our games are prior to that November 25th start date. And, you know, we are obviously anxious to hear what that means for our MTE. My hope is that they just push it back and we'll still be able to participate. I worry a little bit that, you know, versus the guarantee we're expected to get, there may be an opportunity for teams to pay in to play in this bubble. So we're hopeful that it gets pushed back, but would be curious to hear what others are hearing about MTEs that you are currently scheduled to play that might be impacted by the potential start date of November 25th. Don't know if anyone out there is in that same type of situation or not. Sounds like maybe not.
We were supposed to play in an MTE. It was supposed to be in Jamaica, and then it was in Florida, which is like the epicenter. And it's more venue driven and how many spectators, if you have that at all. So our third party is looking at trying to move it to a site that those schools could come to, but we haven't heard anything yet.
This is Doc again. You know, one of the things I think it's going to be interesting, and I was talking to Tony Pujol from North Alabama earlier today, and I guess one of the things is what's going to happen to contracts, you know, after November 25th. If you have contracts to play, will they all be invalidated? Will the NCAA come in and ask people to, you know, just put everything off for a year? Will force majeure come into effect? So there's a lot of questions to be answered that I'm not sure anybody really knows what those answers are.
Yeah, I think, Doc, if we learn anything in this with football and some guarantee games we had, what I've experienced on our campus and talking to other schools and ADs and coaches is everyone is, since we're all kind of in the same boat, it's in all our best interest to work this out together, and whether that's pushing to a later date or just completely saying, you know what, we're agreeing not to play each other and we'll find other games. And on the call yesterday on Lead One, Dan Gavitt had addressed this, and he said, in the opinion of the NCAA legal counsel, is that if the NCAA moves to a later start date, that would allow schools out of contracts. But as with the caveat on everything, is, you know, connect with your legal counsel on campus to get a good read on that. But generally, that's what the NCAA legal counsel is advising at the moment.
Hey, let's take the question from Kevin from Davidson. You know, has there been any discussion in terms of minimum squad size or criteria for postponing games, or do you feel that a single positive test for a team would be grounds for the whole team to be quarantined and the game canceled and postponed? I know we have a little bit of history with football relative to that, but football teams are obviously 85 to 100, so you can have some positives on football and still field a team. Basketball being, you know, 13 to 15, and if you start doing contact tracing, you don't have to go very far before you've eliminated potentially half the team, if not more. I haven't heard anything specific to basketball relative to that. I'm sure those conversations are going to be held, but any other athletic directors or coaches, have you heard anything specifically where that may be tracking relative to basketball positive tests and either postponing or canceling competition?
I think I responded, Wood, to Kevin, that I would think that the testing protocol is going to follow whatever the NCAA decides. So if they decide something different for basketball, because it's fewer people, and if you treat them as a family unit, and again, to practice as a team. If one goes out, I guess it could depend on if the test, the person had no contact. But what we've heard on basketball so far, just in general, is, the close contact, 15 minutes, 6 feet, and the whole team goes down. Now, whether the 14 days changes or not, I think it could depend on the type of testing. This is a little different, but the tennis US Open right now, they're in a bubble, and they are testing, and it's an individual sport, but they are testing 2 or 3 times a week, and they have had a couple of individuals test positive. Again, different, but they'll most likely be coming back before 14 days in a safe way. So that's what I know.
Any other thoughts or comments on that particular question?
Hey, Wood, there's a question too from Jason about how will the AQs potentially be awarded, or I guess the non-AQs would be if there's no non-conference play, if that becomes a trend, how do you get access to the NCAA tournament? What criteria will the committee use on selection? I think that's a great question. When I don't have the answer to, I can tell you that I'm on the championship oversight committee, and we don't have oversight of the basketball championships. But for other sports, this question's coming up a lot, because if you look at the fall sports right now being conducted in the spring, you're looking at potentially reduced championship fields. So maybe 75% of the bracket, when there's discussion around 50%. How do you handle the AQs versus the non-AQs? And many people feel like the AQ from your conference is one of the biggest benefits of being an NCAA Division I member institution, and that you really have to protect those AQs. But another question that came in on this is, what do you do if schools opt out or aren't able to play? And I think those two things could potentially come together. But I don't know if Wood or you or others have heard anything out of the basketball oversight on how they might address access to the championship, assuming maybe if it's not the same size field or otherwise.
I have not, but I know Jeff Hathaway is on this call, and he's got a lot of experience on the men's basketball committee, having selected a number of fields in his tenure. Jeff, any insight, or have you heard anything coming from your sources?
Wood, I haven't. I have not. I don't know where the MBOC is on it right now, or where the men's basketball selection committee is. So I'm sorry, but I cannot enlighten anybody on this topic today.
Well, Jeff, can't you just make something up? No one will hold it against you.
You just want me to say that Albany has an automatic qualification?
I would be fine with that.
I thought so.
Yeah. I do know that in other sports, the question is being pushed back to the sport oversight committee to get guidance on that, because there's just so many unanswered questions, and that's a good one I wish we had an answer to. Let's see. What do you want to? We got one other one. Has there been any discussions with the NCAA about cost sharing if institutions were to host a bubble type event? And I know Doc mentioned that East Tennessee State is looking into this. I saw in the chat that someone mentioned that Iona is looking to do this in the state of New York. So that's good info. I personally would be pleasantly surprised if the NCAA were to offer cost sharing in this scenario, but I can tell you that the cost of doing championships is not going down. Obviously, with the need for increased testing, travel, not just in the basketball championship, but across the board in championships, it's an exponential increase in the cost of doing championships, even at like the fall sports at a reduced level, reduced field. So I would be surprised, but I don't know if anyone's heard anything or might be willing to chip in to help make that happen.
You know, Mark, I haven't gotten any inkling that the NCAA would actually assist financially. What I'm most worried about is this country has thrived on entrepreneurial spirit. And you look at basketball and other sports and think of all the promoters who have, put kids through college, bought fancy cars. I think we need to be very careful. We can do a lot of scheduling and formatting for getting teams together on our own. If ADs and coaches talk and communicate, I don't believe it's going to take a lot of outside influence like an MTE to get people together at East Tennessee State or in the Greensboro Coliseum or in Richmond or, up in New York. I think we can do that ourselves, and we can keep our costs relatively stable, and there doesn't have to be an extra layer there of expense to get together and have games. So I think it's going to take a lot of communication, cooperation. To me, the big challenge is what do we do with our existing non-conference schedule? At what point do we punt the non-conference schedule that we have now, or at what point do we start unraveling contracts and trying to push them off a year to then say, okay, now I'm going to get 4 games or 6 games in this bubble or controlled environment setting. So that to me is the when do you push go on that kind of scenario?
Yeah, I think you hit it. You hit the nail right on the head. We at ETSU, we're just trying to, facilitate, situations where teams can come in and play. This isn't a revenue generator for us. This is just offsetting costs. And that's what we want to do, because as you and I have talked on numerous occasions, we should be able to do a lot of the things as, athletic departments and athletic directors and coaches to do things that are good for our institution and for our conferences and for, college basketball in general without that mentality of having to generate, tons of money. So whatever the costs are, just kind of share them and then get the thing going. And I think what you said also about unraveling, the non-conference schedule is going to be critical, because we're going to have to do it fairly quickly once the dates are all established by the NCAA.
Yes.
Yeah, and Wood, to add to that, I know on our campus, relative to scheduling and budget is, for those of us that have been in athletics for quite some time, it's kind of like rolling back the clock 15 years, 20 years, where it was not uncommon to get up in the morning, hit the road with some food and on a bus to go play a non-conference game or conference, shoot around, play the game, load back up with food, load back up on the bus and get home. And I think for most of us, that's what it's going to require. The examples you've listed in Virginia and Kim in North Carolina, same kind of conversations are happening, up here. Siena College is right down the road from us. And, it probably would make a lot of sense. We're in a little dispute right now over our men's basketball series, but maybe this gives us a way for us to figure this out, since we're so close to one another, help each other out from a budget standpoint. To Kim's point, get as many games in as possible. I think that's where we all have common ground, regardless of what conference you're in, is if you're in close proximity to somebody, play them, right? It's a 1 year or 2, maybe 2 at the most. I think we just need to keep in mind this is hopefully a short-term problem that we need to fix and just get through this season. And whatever creativity and cooperation that takes, I think we're going to need to do. And my guess and my hope is most people are going to be willing to make that happen, whether it's pushing games off that are already scheduled, to your point, Wood, at down the road, later date, and then work on getting some games that you can actually play.
I would also add, I hadn't thought about that, but depending on the guarantees, we've talked about as a conference, if we were to do a non-conference experience, ADs that have guarantees in December, as an example, would want to first see if they could keep that guarantee game, obviously, would be first and foremost. And until we know that, I mean, some schools are still thinking that they'll generate their revenue through those guarantees. But otherwise, I mean, our attorney has said with COVID that it's already null and void. There's language in the contract that would not require us to play.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kim. And like, there's contract, and then there's probably just doing the right thing given the circumstances. And I think, I think most people are willing to do the right thing. But I think we're hearing the same advice you're getting from your legal counsel in terms of the ability to get out of contracts. I think there's been a couple examples where you've seen, though, people really digging in their heels. Maybe not at basketball at this point, but in some other sports where they said, no, this is you're liable for this, and so we just need to, again, I think, all work together to get through this. You got to remember we're in a pandemic, right? I have to remind myself that. And I actually don't have to remind myself that. Every morning I wake up, I'm reminded. Wood, we got anything else in the chat box here?
Let me see. Let's see. Kelly was talking about, the Nashville area has a number of Division I schools. So, bubble system could work certainly in Nashville area. I know, Robert, you probably have, you're down there in the corner of Southwest Virginia. You got all kinds of states colliding in your area. Have you guys been talking to anyone?
Yeah, a little bit. We're just kind of waiting for clarification on the announcement of when the season is going to start. Yeah, I got some concerns about, going to a total bubble situation with sponsorships and things of that nature, hoping to at least protect some home games.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real concern. Almost having to rebuild. We lost IMG College in this whole shuffle, so we're doing everything in-house again. So there's some concerns there. And then somebody spoke to travel party size. I mean, I think that's something we all got to look at. I think the more people you have traveling, the better chance, potentially somebody's going to pick this thing up. So there's just so much to work through right now. It's and then for a lot of us, this financial hit with the guarantee games is going to be really extraordinary on top of everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yep. One thing that we've talked about, we don't have any answers. Let's say you do this bubble in Nashville, or let's say you do the bubble in Richmond, and let's say you get Virginia and a couple other schools that have fan following. You can't have any, you're not going to have any attendance. Right now we're limited to 50, and you're not going to put 50 for a game. You're just going to keep it empty. So there's no attendance. So it becomes very important. The TV component has great value for alumni, basketball fans around the country. So who owns the TV rights? How do you monetize the TV for those kind of bubble events? And how do you organize and orchestrate that? So where do the TV partners come in potentially for these mass AAU type events? Because that's unique. It's kind of the Wild West out there in that regard. Anyone have any thoughts relative to that?
This is Doc. I think one of the other things that kind of plays into that is what are your conference's TV responsibilities? I know in the SoCon, and Kim, you probably are much more familiar with this than me, but the SoCon has a responsibility to provide so many exposures to ESPN, and so our non-conference games a lot of times meet those requirements for the SoCon to have their contract. So I don't know. I mean, I think that's a really good question. Who is going to have, if we did the deal here at ETSU, who would have those TV rights? Would it be ETSU? Would it be the Southern Conference? So I think those are things that people are going to have to, carefully look at.
That's a good point, Doc. Well, hey, I know we're getting to the end of the lunch hour. I'm still looking for my lunch that Doc was supposed to ship me, so it has not arrived yet. But I'm
It's
sure
virtual. Your virtual lunch.
Oh, I missed that. But I think unless
Hey,
yeah,
I think it's in the Outer Banks, you know.
I'm happy. I'm happy to go there. I already missed one vacation in the Outer Banks because I would have to quarantine for 14 days when I get back to New York. So it might be worth it right now. But let's see. Are there any? Oh, here we go. If there's any other questions we'd like to answer, I mean, I'm certainly appreciative of Doc and his team and their efforts to continue to provide really valuable, I think, programming through TopConnect. You know, I know I'm certainly happy and to be a part of this. Appreciate, you know, Wood, your time, and Doc, you know, for providing this unique opportunity to do this. Technical issues aside, hopefully everyone got some value out of this today, and appreciate those of you that are part of this. But any other, Doc, any parting thoughts, words of wisdom from you or Wood?
He's on mute. Looks like Doc's trying to speak on mute. There he goes. Coming through.
I'm unmuted now.
I had a line for that.
Hey, a lot of people want to mute me all the time. You know, my whole career they were trying to mute me, you know, but I fought through it. But I appreciate everybody being here. I'm sorry about the technical difficulty. Like Jeff Cups texted me, said ETSU probably needs to pay its Verizon bill, and yeah, I'll have to talk to the president about that. But you know, I'd also like to thank Michael Ruitt on my staff and Cheryl Hanks, who kind of made this happen and kind of figured it out on the fly, and of course Wood and Mark for, you know, stepping in there. But it's great to hear from Kim and Ken and Robert and, you know, the ADs that were on here. So a lot of good information, I think, and, you know, appreciate all of you, and, you know, thanks again.